All right, TpTers, welcome to the conference. I'm here with Brittany Verelinch from Verity Media Marketing, and she's going to be talking to us about Facebook groups. But Brittany, first, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Verity Media Marketing.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I so appreciate it. And really quick version, I actually started in the travel space. I'm still very much active in there. So travel blogging, starting with just getting people to go on trips. I still do that. I take teachers on trips and things. And what I actually started that, even though I was a travel blogger, I didn't actually blog regularly. I started by growing a community in a Facebook group. That turned into them saying, hey, we should go on trips together, which is why I then started the travel blog and the group trips and all that. And then from there, I just figured out like, hey, I'm actually pretty good at building this community with the Facebook group thing. So I started helping other people. And when I started talking to some of my friends who were TPT sellers and started getting into that world myself, I realized this was something that a lot of TPTers really don't enjoy doing. They don't really like social media or marketing. And I was like, hey, that's actually the part I like best. And so I've started to learn more. I'm always learning more. And now I'm helping them with like one-on-one services, creating courses and products and things like that.
Perfect. Okay, real fast. Verity Media Marketing. This word Verity, what does that mean, and how did you come up with that?
Yeah. So I actually love the name Verity. If I ever have a girl, it's like one of my top girl names. But it really just means truth. So when we think about marketing and branding and kind of who we are online, there's all this pressure to look a certain way, sound a certain way, to create a certain kind of content. And my goal, my hope for people is that they create content that just is them, right? It's like a projection of them online. So I know that we can't put our whole selves online. We all want to keep certain things to ourselves, but I want for people to figure out what message it is that they really want to say and to use that in all of their social media content instead of having to feel like they have to sound like somebody else or emulate a certain kind of content.
Nice. Okay, and what did you teach? And then how did you get into selling on TPT?
Sure. So I taught fourth and fifth grade for a few years. Then I taught K-5 STEM, which I loved. It was so fun. And how I got into TPT, I think was because I was actually really good, not so much maybe at the subjects, but at the way I taught them. I was doing digital stuff before 2020, right? Like I was using Google Docs to teach writing. I was using Google Classroom almost every day. And I was using it for differentiation. I had like my groups in one classroom, my other groups in another. So it was really natural for me to switch. In fact, I think my class was probably more prepared than others just because of how I was using it. So I saw that that was a need that I could fill. And so honestly, my first few resources were like, well, I've been doing this. So here's what I've been doing. They were ugly as all get out. Like, please don't go look at my first few resources. I still have to go back and like update them. But that's how I first got into TPT for myself was honestly just seeing a need and filling it. Honestly, kind of like what I've done for social media. But when it comes down to like what I like doing the most, what I like doing is the marketing and the storytelling and the social posts. But that's how I came to start in the TPT world was like, well, this is what I know. And I also really do like teaching like microeconomics and stuff to kids and teaching them like math skills through business growing and things like that. So I did a lot of that stuff and brought that to TPT.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about Facebook groups. So let's start with why do you recommend as a TPT seller or an entrepreneur I start a Facebook group?
Yeah, so a couple of big reasons. One big reason is the list building ability. So Facebook groups are great for growing your email list. One easy way to do that is by setting up your membership questions in such a way that you have the email address field so you can collect email addresses as they enter your group. And now not everybody will want to give you their email address right away. So I usually still let them enter my group, even if they're not ready to give an email, because if they're just now hearing from me, they might not be ready yet. They might want to see what else I know first. And that's fine because a Facebook group is also a great place to nurture an audience. So if you're not ready for an email list yet, or if you have an email list and you're just looking for an additional place to nurture an audience, it's a great place for that. Some people use Facebook groups differently too. So even if you don't want a Facebook group as a way to show up to people who haven't bought from you yet, you can also use Facebook groups as a place to communicate with past customers. So you could have like a private Facebook group that they only get the link to when they bought a resource. Like you can have it on the thank you page. So there's all kinds of ways you can use them. My biggest reasons are just the list building, they're free and they're a way to nurture your audience. And also you can share links in there more easily than you can on things like TikTok and Instagram, where you kind of have to do these workarounds to get them to have a link.
Okay, so I have a question for you about the um, collecting the email names when people join your Facebook group, because that's something I didn't do at the beginning because I felt like it was a lot of work. So, are there any tips you have for that, or is it a lot of work and I'm just wrong, or what do you do with that?
No, it can definitely become a lot of work, especially if you start getting tens or 20 or hundreds of people per day. It can be a lot to keep up with at that point. I would say at the beginning, if you're just now starting out, I'd say it's worth doing it. It's worth putting it into a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet or something, just because, that's helping you grow your list. And it's like, why wouldn't you want that, right? It's so valuable. And every time I talk to a TPT seller, like I feel like we all say in unison, the one thing we wish we would have started earlier was emailing our list and growing our list, right? So if that's the one thing you wish would have done, then use social media to do that, and groups are a great place for that. You can use an app called Group Leads. I haven't used that one. I've used one similar to that called Group Convert, and that imports your list into your email for you. You can set up these automations and things in the background for you to do that. So that's one thing you can do if you're like, I just can't be bothered to sit down and do that. Or another thing you can do is hire a VA. But I know that if you're just starting out, that might not be where you are yet. So I would say if you're just in the beginning, you don't have a lot of money, but you have some time, put them in yourself. If you have a little bit of money, then maybe look into that app. If you have someone that you want to just come and take it over for you, you have the money, but you don't have the time, then you might want to hire a VA for that.
Yeah, that's very valuable advice. I definitely wish I had started when I started my Facebook group, I had started with collecting the email addresses when they subscribe or when they join the group, because once I started implementing that, my email list obviously grew, and then of course revenue and everything else grew from there too. So sound advice. I hope everyone listening takes advantage of that. So as a TPT seller, when do you recommend a TPT seller starts a Facebook group?
That's a good question. And my first answer is it depends, because everybody is so different, right? I mean, some people start and they say, you know what, I don't have a lot of money, but I have a lot of time. I'm going to put 20 hours a week into this. And obviously, like I'm in a different position than even like someone like Chris. Like Chris just told me before we started that he has like 3 daughters and that his life is, I'm sure, very, very busy. I'm sure he doesn't have as much free time as I do right now. But if you're, earlier in your career in your 20s or early 30s, or you don't have kids yet, or maybe if you just have a different life schedule, maybe if you have responsibilities, then you have some different time to put in. So it's hard to say when specifically, but I would say if you're just starting out on TPT, like you don't know your niche yet, you don't know what you want to focus on, you probably want to focus on that first. Like, how do you actually create good resources? How does the TPT funnel actually work when someone's looking at a listing? Like if you're learning the basics, you might want to start with that first. But once you're ready to grow an email list, I would say is when you want to start a Facebook group. Although I will say with full disclosure that I did with the travel stuff, I had the group first. So in a way, they actually helped me know what resources to create, because even though the group was about travel, when 2020 happened, obviously I had this Google experience. I was like, all right, guys, I know this is off topic, but what do you guys need right now? How can I help you? And so I think that helped me out because I heard from them what they needed, and I was able to meet resources that was helping them, because I wasn't just like putting out random ideas. And I think because of that, I had some cool success from the beginning that I don't think is typical. But that just depends on you. So I guess answer A is if you feel like you have the energy for it, and you want to use that as a sounding board to create resources, go ahead and go for it now. But if you're just starting out with TPT, like if you just barely made your first resource, then you probably want to learn TPT first, because it's just going to be a lot to learn all at one time.
So, what would you say to the person who says, I don't want to start a Facebook group because it's one more thing to do? Like, I'm already doing a blog and an email and my TPT resources, and I'm creating pins for the Pinterest page. So, what would you say to that person?
I would say I totally get it. And I resonate with that because I feel like as a teacher, the one more thing syndrome is just so potent. You're always getting something else to do. So, one thing you can do is actually use other people's Facebook groups. You always want to do this in a respectful way. But one thing you can do is reach out to people who are in your niche And I would recommend, following them for a while first, building the relationship. Don't just cold pitch it unless you're super confident like me. Sometimes I will cold pitch if I feel like they have something to offer. But generally, you want to build a relationship with someone and look for groups that are in your niche that you can add a different angle to. And you don't want to usually, you want to make sure that you choose someone that has something tangential to what you do. So if you do STEM, for example, and maybe I do K2 STEM and then you do K2 science, like not STEM, just science, I'm going to say, hey, do you want to, can I come up to your audience and tell them how they can do STEM activities during their science block? So that way they can embed that in and they're not having to feel like they're missing out on that. So just something like that, like, can you add to their value to their audience? You always want to lead with that first because they're looking for content ideas. They're looking for collaboration partners. And I also, by the way, I'll make sure that Chris has this. I have a list of ultimate groups, my ultimate master list of Facebook groups for TpT sellers. Like it has groups for every niche that you can think of, and I'm always adding to it. So if you're like, I don't even know what groups to ask, I'll give you some groups to go join. Prefacing that saying that always respect the group admins and moderators. Don't just go in there and start selling stuff. They won't like that. But you can come in and look at the questions that people are asking. How would you answer those in your group? How can you add value to their audience and build your list? Give them a freebie, just like how I offered Chris. You would offer your own freebie to them, and then they would go and grab that. So that's another way to build if you don't want to have your own audience yet.
How much time would you say you're spending on your Facebook group, and how often are you showing up there, posting or otherwise?
Good question. It depends on this phase I'm in, but like right now with my group, the social media magic one, I actually don't show up in there a whole lot. I may be in there for an hour or so a week. But when I was first growing it like a year and a half ago, I was in there probably 30 minutes a day just because I was setting things up and I was building relationships with people. So that's really normal. At the beginning, you're going to spend more time. And also, as you look for people who are really engaged and naturally just in their commenting and things, you can also let them know, like, hey, I see you engaging. Thank you so much. And you can start encouraging them to post too. So it's not just you. So expect more time at the beginning, but you can always draw back over time. And using things like scheduling and batch creating, that'll cut down on your time too.
So, what kind of posts do you put in your Facebook group?
Yeah, good question. So one thing I do, if you ever go into my group, Social Media Magic, you'll actually see that I repurpose a lot of content from other places. So my carousel posts on Instagram, I make them in such a way that when I share them into my Facebook group, they look really natural. It's kind of hard to show you without showing you, but if you go into my group, you'll see it. My reels actually. So when I post on Instagram, I have it set up in the back end that whatever posts on Instagram will post on Facebook. That goes to my Facebook page. So I'll share from my Facebook page into my group, and it looks really natural because it's in the Facebook format. And I also ask questions. Those posts that are like the colored background of the avatar, those do really well if you try to keep it under like 80, I think 120 characters. So those are really good. Just asking questions that the people want to engage with. And according to your niche. So in the social media one, it might be something like, where are you guys spending most of your time these days? Instagram or TikTok? Make it super easy for them to answer. One word answer is great. Asking questions about them because I genuinely want to know, okay, are you guys cat people or dog people? And then guess which one I am. They all know that I'm a cat person, but you know what I mean? Just things like that, kind of keeping it fun and then alternating between subject specific and then audience specific, I think is good. Having a mix of getting to know you. You can also use things like polls. You can also use things like write a prompt depending on the type of group you have. Like there's different types of content. If you just go and click the post button, you'll see these different types come up and you can just play with the options you have.
Did you say how often do you post in there?
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. So really not that often right now. If you see that I'm launching something, you'll see me post in there a lot more often. Launching just means that I have a course or something coming available. But yeah, I also have like my repurposed stuff and my scheduled stuff is like 3 to maybe 5 times a week, but I don't post in there every day.
Wow. Okay. And how often are you making a sales pitch to your group?
I sell every day.
Oh,
I sell
nice.
every day. Yeah, I sell every day. But what I sell, I feel like I sell the same things all the time. So people kind of know what to expect. It's like, well, if I'm a social media manager, you probably already know that if you're in my stuff, like, oh, she does that. So every time I have a podcast episode, I'll say, by the way, if you want help with this, you can DM me. So I guess I would call that a soft pitch. I wouldn't say that I'm hard selling in there every day. But I think that a lot of times we're scared of sales, which is so weird because we want more sales, but we're scared of selling. So don't be afraid to sell if you have something that solves a legitimate problem. And also, I do that a lot in the comments too. So if someone is asking a question about something and I'll answer a question, I'll say, hey, if you want to go more in depth about this, then go check this out, or this is for you. So that's another thing too, is that I'm not saying I just sell and that's all I do, but how can you tell the story of a resource or tell the story of a problem that you solved and then have your resource or your offer be a solution to that is going to be probably the best option. And yours will be a little bit different because I'm also a service provider, right? So my group for TpT sellers is a lot different than the one I have for like my math resources, because a math resource, $2, $3, $4 versus a service that's a few hundred a month. So that's another thing to keep in mind too.
Yeah, I don't know if this is exactly a question, but I notice in my Facebook group, and I have a large one, that when I post a link to a TpT product, I might get, 1 or 200 views, and that's it. So like 0.01%. Like I get like no views at all. So what do you do to overcome that?
Yeah, that's not just you. That is actually Facebook suppressing it. Facebook does suppress posts with links in it. That's a really good observation. So one thing I'll do is kind of like a teaser post, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I know Chris doesn't talk like me. I'm sure he doesn't have a Valley Girl accent, but like, oh my gosh, guys, I'm so excited. I just made this thing. It's a game changer. And that'll be the post. Or I'll say like, oh my gosh, if you have a Facebook group, I have something you're going to want, comment blank, and I'll send it to you. So I have no link in the post. They comment what they want in the comment, and then I'll either DM it to them or I'll respond in the comment with the link. So I haven't seen, I've done a little bit of testing. I haven't seen a major difference between commenting with the link or sending it to them to see if that really affects the reach at all. But one thing is, if you comment with a link, that does add a comment to the post and that does get it pushed out to more people, just because that's how algorithms work. So that's one thing. And then I do personally message people on my personal Facebook. I know that some people don't like that. But when you do that, people are more likely to see your post. So if you're posting in your Facebook group as your personal profile, like as Chris, as Brittany, and you just message them recently, they're more likely to see the post you make in there. So that's something you want to keep in mind too.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, so based on a lot of the things you said, a Facebook group is designed to build community. I mean, that's one of the things you mentioned. So, what are some best practices for me as the Facebook group admin or moderator to build that community?
You're going to hear my cat in a second. I'm sorry. I closed the door and she's going to meow.
Coming in.
So yeah, as far as building community, I would say it's just like making friends anywhere else, right? I heard someone say that it's like being interesting and being interested. So you want to be interested in the people who are in your group, who they are, what they're doing, what their lives are like, because we don't just want to sell to people. We obviously, the reason that we're here is that we want to make a difference somehow, whether that's in the students' lives or TpT sellers' lives. Like, we want to make life easier for people. So we want to get to know them. What makes them tick? What are their hopes and dreams? What are their goals? And then you also want to be interesting. So if I just say, hey, I have this thing, do you want to buy it? That's not super interesting. So how can you make that post more interesting? You can tell a story, you can do trivia, you can have a game. I've done silly games like something like, okay, let's all guess where you're from. Leave an emoji and we'll guess the state you live in without you saying it. And then they'll respond to each other in the comments, which also pushes the post out to more people. So the little things you can do, like gamifying, having events, is really great. If you can go live once a week, I know that not everybody can do that, but if you can, that's great. If you can have a schedule for that. And I will say, full disclosure, I'm not going live every week right now. When I was building my first travel group, I went live every week at the same time for 2 years. And so people came to expect, yeah. So people came to expect it. They came to know this is when this person's going live, I'm going to come and hang out. And I would do like a little spin the wheel prize every week. So there's little things that you can do. And the cool thing with it as a TpT seller is you don't even have to spend money. You can just send a resource to them for free. You know what I mean? Like something you already have made. So there's a lot of things you can do to build community. You can even have people in your community and eventually go live and host some kind of session or something. Like it doesn't have to be just you. And I think that's when a community is really a community, is when it becomes less about the person and more about the group itself. And it'll take time to get there, but look out for those people. Who are the people who are naturally showing up and contributing, who want to collaborate? Those are going to be people who kind of co-lead the community with you.
Yeah, and the cool thing is you start as you create the community, you're creating your ideal customers. So I noticed that in my Facebook group, I get all sorts of math teachers in there, but over time, if they are in there long enough, they're going to start to have mindset shifts so that they're more in my camp. So now they're ideal for purchasing.
Totally. And the fact that they're in the group more, if you think about like when we're sharing our links and things, it's going to be hard for people to like know that a resource is by you when they're on TpT, right? Because when they're on TpT, they're using search, they're looking for a specific thing, and they may or may not be paying attention to who made it. But if you've built a relationship with them, then they might go into the group and say, hey, at Brittany, do you have X resource for Y thing? Right? I'm teaching my kids this next week. Do you have anything for that? And I think that is a really cool thing. When you have someone who they're kind of making it harder for themselves in a way. They could have just gone to TpT, but instead they went to you first because you've become known for something and you've built a relationship with them. That means you're really doing something right. And I really do think you'll get there if you spend a little bit of time and energy at the beginning, you get to know them, and then eventually it kind of takes a life on of its own.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so if I am starting a Facebook group, I have to go in, I give it a name and a picture and everything, but then I have to go in and set up my rules. So my question is, what rules do you recommend, and how fast are you on kicking people out of your Facebook group?
That's a good question. So for my travel group, I have very few rules in there. It's kind of almost everything falls under be respectful. Like be respectful. And I'll give some examples. So, like, being respectful looks like answering someone's question. It does not look like just spamming us with your blog, right? So I give some examples of that, and I kind of do it in a cheeky way for the travel thing. But I am not super patient in there anymore, just because there's like 5,000 people in that group and people are constantly asking questions. I just don't have time, right? It's not the main thing I'm doing right now. And I tell them that. I was like, guys, please don't do this because then I have to kick you out. I don't have the time, energy for it. But they'll also now report each other, which is helpful. So if someone sees something like, oh, Brittany's not cool with that, don't do that, which is nice because then they kind of like police them for me. So that's really cool. As far as the TpT seller group, I never have problems in there, which is great because I think everybody, yeah. So I think it's small enough and everybody knows that like why we're here. So I think they're really good about that. I do think it is different though for TpT sellers if you have teachers in your group, because a lot of teachers don't actually understand how social media works. Like they don't know the difference between a page and a group, or like who's seeing what post. So I would say it's up to you how fast you want to be, how much you wanted to lay down the law, so to speak. But they are your customers or your future customers. That's something you want to keep in mind. I have noticed that when I have a group that's just like a customer only group versus people who have stumbled into my group and people who have paid, that I get a little more respect from people who have paid for stuff before. So that's something to consider if you don't have a group yet. If you don't want to have a group where you have a whole bunch of random people, you can have a Facebook group for customers only, and they only get the link like once they've joined your email list or once they've purchased a resource. That way you can not have to worry about rules. But rules, I would say you want to make sure you have no promotion, be respectful, and especially if there's anything that you want to highlight, like maybe there's a certain like topic, like I know some people are really passionate about saying like don't say anything about faith or race, or do you agree? I've seen groups that say like, do you agree with Black Lives Matter, and you have to say yes or no, and that's an entry into the group. So you get to decide what your rules are going to be depending on what your values and goals are.
Yeah, when I started, I had very few rules, but the bigger the group gets, the more rules I need, and it's kind of bananas. But now my group has all sorts of rules. Like I just made a rule: you can't post any YouTube videos because it's always a trap. It's always people trying to promote their own self. So they're trying to get around the no promotion thing by just sharing a YouTube, but it's always them. And no surveys. I don't let them do surveys anymore because every kid who's in college trying to do a dissertation comes in trying to do it. So I have all these weird rules that I didn't think of at the beginning, and I wouldn't recommend doing it at the beginning, but I've learned. Yeah, and I'm also pretty quick on the kick out thing now. Did you say you were? You kick them out pretty
No,
quickly?
I am pretty quick. I think if it was my TPT seller group, I might be a little more patient and use that as a teachable moment because I know they're learning about social media. But in my other groups, I'm not patient because they're bigger and because it's a little different. I would call that like a B2C, business to customer. I think I'm a little less patient because there's so many people in that one. If it's like business to business, I'm like, well, you're learning this, so let me teach you. Let me explain why this isn't okay because you might have your own group in the future and I want you to understand why. So it kind of just depends on you and like what the goal of the group is. And also, are you willing to lose a customer? Because it could be really awkward if that person has bought something from you before and they like your stuff. But you get to choose. I'm not saying you shouldn't. So totally up to you.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were a new TPT seller, tell me what should I do first? Blog, email, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook page, Facebook group. If I can only do one, what do you say? And then what would the next only one be? And only one.
This is so hard because I feel like when you're an expert in anything that you're supposed to say you should do this, but I actually hate telling people what to do. Like I want to be like, make your own choice. It's your business. But if I had to choose, if I only had one, if I had to do one, honestly, it would probably be a blog first. And let me just explain the reasoning for that. Even though I know Facebook group, why are you talking about blog? Because if I'm thinking about the long term, right? If I'm thinking long term, when you have a blog, it's easy to build your email list, right? Because you have the pop-ups and slide-ins and you have links on your blog posts that you can build your email list. If I was doing nothing else, I would probably still have a blog. The reason I did a Facebook group first is because I didn't know what I was going to be doing. It's a little different when you know what you're going to be doing first. So if you know for sure what your TPT niche is, you know what your name's going to be, you know what brand you're going to have, you're ready to pay for the domain, you're ready to pay for the hosting, I would say go ahead and start a blog. But if you are not sure, then start a Facebook group because you can always change the name of a group. You can always change the brand. You can always pivot. It's not a big deal. Blog, if you change your name, it's a little bit bigger of a deal. It's really hard to change a domain name. If you've dealt with that, then you know. But if you haven't, then I would say if you're sure, start a blog. If you're not, then I would say Facebook group.
So you're saying start a Facebook group over Pinterest, over Instagram, over YouTube. Totally
Yeah,
agree.
and YouTube, I love YouTube, I should say too. YouTube is great for getting discovered. Like honestly, on par with a blog. It's just about the email list. Is that's what I'm thinking about is email list building. A blog is great for that. And then a Facebook group is great for that too, for getting the emails. Because I just think about when I think about where I am compared to other people, I feel very privileged because I started my Facebook group in 2018. I've built an email list of 5,000 people. Not that 5,000 is a lot. I mean, there are people with 100,000 people on their email list. It's so varied. But when I think about like, wow, even if I pivoted, I have these 5,000-ish people that I can say, hey, I'm doing this now, or what do you guys think about this? Whereas I wouldn't have had that if I'd started YouTube and wasn't also building my email list. If I had started Pinterest, but I didn't have anywhere for them to go. And Pinterest, I should say too, the hard one with that is it's great for traffic, but if you don't have a blog or resources, then you can't send them anywhere on Pinterest. So that's my reasoning. I obviously love Instagram. You guys, if you follow me, you'll see me there all the time. But as far as which I think is the most bang for your buck, I would say if you're just starting out and you know what you're going to do, blog. If you don't know, Facebook group.
Yeah, I completely agree for all the reasons you said. The Facebook group, the other cool thing about it, you get the social proof element. You know, people come in, they see you've got 5,000 or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, this is someone credible." But beyond that, you give the Facebook group is one of my freebies I give away everywhere, and everyone thinks like I'm doing them a favor that I'm going to invite them into a community where I'm trying to brainwash them. But it's a great freebie to give away.
I love that you said that. I talk about my email list and my Facebook groups like We talk a lot in list building of like, give them a freebie so they get on your list. No, sell your list. Your list, your email list is a valuable place to be. Your Facebook group is a valuable place to be. The Facebook group itself is a lead magnet. I love that you said that, because it's a place where you're showing up, you're providing value, you're providing resources that they can't get anywhere else. And by the way, for that, if you are going to be giving them a freebie in exchange for their email, I do suggest giving them something different than you have everywhere else. I know that's a little bit of extra work, but you're kind of selling the exclusivity, right? Like, this group is a place that, like, why should they come join your group if they're following you on Instagram, if they're following your TpT store? There has to be something in it for them, right? So that's just good for marketing. What's in it for them? What am I going to get when I join your group? So just an exclusive freebie is a great way to kind of entice people even further to see that the group is a great place to be.
Yeah, I don't know what you can comment on this if you want, but in my TpT store, every person who buys anything or gets anything free gets my thank you letter, and my thank you letter says I've got some more freebies for you, and one is an invite onto my email list for a freebie, and the other is here's the Facebook group. So, okay, so I have one more question for you, and that is, where do you see, so Facebook groups have kind of, they've ebbed and flowed, and there's been changes over the years, obviously. But what I really like about them, and I've said this in other places, is they're the only place on Facebook where you will never see an ad. And Mark Zuckerberg's come out and said that he loves Facebook groups, he wants to keep them what they are, and he won't let ads go in there. So hopefully, as long as he's there, that's going to stay the case. So, what do you see happening with Facebook groups? What do you see trends going on? What do you see the future of it? And in all those trend things, the at everyone option is now available. So are you using it? Do you think it's going to stay? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like the everyone thing is like the most controversial thing, right, about Facebook groups right now. I'm for it. And it depends on the kind of group you have. So in my travel group, where it's mostly like some people are in there just to learn cool stuff or for deals, I don't want to use it. And I don't want to use it too much because I don't want to abuse it, right? Like, if I have a trip I'm going on or something, if I'm selling something, if I want everybody to see a certain post, that's when I'll use it, but I don't use it all the time in there. In my social media group, I do use it more frequently because I know that everyone is there for a very, very specific purpose. And so I'm not putting content in there unless I know it's super, super valuable to the people in there. The travel one's more like a fun group, right? This one is more serious. I think that if you set the expectation, and you could even put that in your rules, by the way, like, hey, I use the at everyone tag. I use this every day. If you're not cool with that, please don't join the group because I'm going to use it. So you can just let people know. But if you use the at everyone tag, the admins can each use it once a day. So if you didn't know, you can do that. It tags everybody in your group. I will say, some people see it as a bummer because they'll go to their notifications and be like, yay, someone tagged me. Oh, it's everybody. Oh, man. So you do want to keep in mind how it's going to be perceived by people, but I think it's a good tool, especially because reach on posts is really low. I'm not going to lie about that. It's a lot lower because there are more people with groups and everybody's in a million groups. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about that. Groups have changed. I agree with that. I have heard rumors, and maybe they were just beta testing this before, that they were going to try to make people pay for more reach in groups. I think the at everyone tag, I know, I was scared about that, but I think the at everyone tag is like the answer for that, at least for now. And I like groups because they're curated. You know what I mean? Like, when you go on a page, like, I'm sure we all follow a few pages on Facebook for whatever reason, the comments can get really nasty. Like, the comment sections can get really mean. And I have been always really intentional that I choose the people who are in my group. Like, I don't want people in there who are just mean or judgmental or whatever, right? Like, I would rather you not be in there. Even if you're going to buy from me, I'd rather say no to that money. So that's the kind of choice that you want to make. But I feel like I want my groups to be a place that I want to be. I want them to be fun. I want people to ask questions that I enjoy answering. In my travel groups, especially the travel group, I learn things from the people in my group. Like, I'm supposedly the expert, but people share things all the time that I'm like, what? I didn't know that. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. So I want for my groups to be a place where I enjoy spending time, because think about this, your business, like, especially if you're still in the classroom, this is also probably your hobby. Like, don't you want this to be as fun as possible? I'm sure that you don't want this to be any more stressful than it should be, right? So I'm all about keeping my marketing as fun as I can because I want to enjoy the people I'm interacting with. That's my take on it anyway.
It's a great take. All right, Brittany. Well, thank you for all the information you've given us. Where do people go if they want to learn more about you? Tell us about your podcast. And then also, if we want resources or help starting a Facebook group, what should we do?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, again for having me. So my handle is actually in the recording of this video. If it's still there, Brittany Verelinch, because I know my name's hard to spell, so you can just find that there. My podcast is called Social Media Magic. So you can find it basically anywhere else that you get your podcasts. If you search on Facebook, you will see Social Media Magic will bring up my Facebook group. It's a group about groups. I know it's so meta and it's double meta because Facebook is owned by Meta. But if you have any questions, that's a good place to ask. Or you can get onto my email list. I share all kinds of stuff there as well. You can grab my ultimate list of Facebook groups for TpT sellers and teacherpreneurs. That's a good place to start if you're looking for other groups to add value to or people to collaborate with. Or you can just send me a DM and let me know what you specifically need because I help people set up groups. I help people with one-on-one stuff. I have courses. So I just want to help you. So let me know how you need help.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much. It's been very valuable, and I hope everyone listening goes out and starts their Facebook group or expands upon it so that they can reach more people and influence more people and make more money. So, thank you again for being here.
You're so welcome. Thanks again for having me.